And welcome to the Healthy Aging podcast. And as you know, we have moved on into nutrition, and we are very, very excited to speak with our first guest in our nutrition section. So Susie, if you could do a wee bit of an introduction for us, that would be amazing.
Of course, Lorraine, and what a first guest to have when it comes to nutrition. How excited and how honoured are we to be able to interview this amazing guy that we actually both know. And I actually feel a little bit big-headed at the fact that I know this person, because the credentials that go alongside the wonderful Richard Chessor is phenomenal. So let me just tell you a little bit about Rich before we get into the podcast. And for people that are watching on YouTube, because we do this on YouTube as well, you will see him blushing as I praise him up. But he definitely deserves a lot of praise. So Lorraine and I both work within CrossFit Fife. You know, I'm one of the co-owners of CrossFit Fife. Lorraine works within CrossFit Fife, and we were very fortunate to get to meet Rich within CrossFit Fife. So he trains there alongside, I was going to say alongside us, but that's not true. We don't really train there, do we, Lorraine? No. Lorraine's never trained there, actually. At least I show up sometimes. When I'm in Scotland, I show up. So, but Richard is actually let me see if I get this correct, the physical performance lead for the British swimming team, which consists of the nutrition, strength and conditioning and physiology teams. Did I say that right, Rich?
Yeah, spot on.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it? So basically what that means is he's the lead nutritionist for the British swimming team, which is just incredible. He's actually been with the British swimming team since 2016, I believe. And prior to that was the lead nutritionist for Scottish rugby. Now, prior to being with Scottish rugby, he was actually working in the nutrition support to the weight category with athletes in boxing and judo. So you can see that his full background is nutrition and sports performance. Yeah. Now, obviously, our podcast is all about healthy aging. We're not really focused on sports. However, Rich is somebody who, as a person, really, really invests in himself. You know, he makes sure that he is aging well. He's got incredible knowledge on nutrition as a whole. And as we spoke about on last week's podcast, nutrition comes in so many different categories, whether it be that you're looking at it from a nutritional point of view to just stay well, whether it be to enhance sport, or whether it be to lose weight. There's different ways in how you can look at nutrition. And so we thought it would be brilliant to have Rich come on and share some real nuggets with us. So that's our introduction to Rich. Welcome to our podcast, Rich, and thank you so much for joining us. Lorraine is going to start off with our first question.
Sure.
So yes, welcome. Thank you so much, as Susie said, for coming along and joining us. And we always start the podcast in the exact same way, which is to ask our guests what their top 3 tips would be for healthy aging.
Sure thing. So I suppose first to say thanks very much, guys, for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the very humbling introduction, Susie. And like you say, as much as all my background and all my work is in elite performance sport nutrition, there are a number of parallels with healthy aging that hopefully we can tease out over the next half an hour or so. First of all, I suppose the base of good sports performance, whether you're an active CrossFitter up to my elite gold medal winning swimmers, it's built on a base of health and wellness for a start. So we can only do what we do because we start on that base of health and wellness, and then we build the performance nutrition aspects up from there. So it's some of those fundamentals that transition across all ages and stages of the life cycle and of performance as well. But okay, come back to the question. Top 3 tips. I suppose the first one I'd lead with, certainly going to be a nutrition one, and it's in around consistency. If I think about healthy aging, we don't age instantly. We age over a long period of time. Aging is clearly progressive, and the impact that aging has on us, in my mind, is a result on the inputs of what we eat and our outputs of what we actually do with our body, and it's the aggregation of those over time that makes a difference. So if I think of a scenario, let's use somebody who is under-muscled, however we want to define that. So somebody who's aging and maybe doesn't have the muscle mass that they would wish to in order to fulfill their lifestyle in the way that they would want to. The reason that they are under-muscled is not because of the absence of going to the gym last week, or because they've actually decreased the amount of walking that they did last week, or they didn't hit 10,000 steps the previous day, whatever it might well be. The reason that this person's under-muscled is the aggregation of consistently either not challenging themselves in terms of stressing the stress to that musculature and therefore stimulating further growth of that musculature, or maybe an consistent inadequate energy deficit, so simply not eating enough in order to build muscle, or perhaps that's more specific on being an inadequate total protein intake throughout their diet. So it's not. The point I'm making, I suppose, it's nothing about aging is a singular event, and therefore nutrition for healthy aging isn't a singular event as well, and that stacks up whether it's under-muscled, whether it's somebody who's overweight, whether it's poor blood glucose handling, whatever it might well be. It's the aggregation of choices and habits, behaviors that we make that result in change. So the focus that I want people to think about when it comes to healthy aging and nutrition would be one around just be consistent with your habits. And largely just aim for better instead of perfect. I speak quite a lot about that when it comes to nutrition, is aim for better instead of perfect, which is why I kind of push back, and I don't really like this well, my diet starts on Monday mentality, because it's not to suggest a completely different conversation when we talk about diets and success and failure rates there. But I'd rather people just think about, actually, you know, it's regardless of what day it is, I'm just going to do a little bit better today than I did maybe yesterday. And if we consistently do that, then good things will come. So aging doesn't happen in an instant, and neither does nutrition to be able to support that. So that'd probably be the first thing I'd lead with. The next bit I'd maybe say is on a similar vein, is kind of the concept of use it or lose it. So if we looked at, you know, if I fast forward 40 years and where I would like to be to contribute to this world, I'd want to be in a place where I am physically competent. I'm able to move in the way that I want to do. I'm satisfied. I'm free from burden of disease, particularly non-communicable chronic diseases as well. And a lot of that requires us just to use our body well throughout that period of time. So if we looked at something like muscle or bone or joint tissue or our brains, we need to use them in order to prevent us from losing them. So take muscle, for example. Muscle is gradually lost over the time course of our life unless we actively go about and changing that. So sarcopenia, the long-term loss in muscle, or primarily through the disuse of muscle, is going to be this is stepping out with my area, but it's probably going to be a big predictor in ability to lead a healthy lifestyle later in life, particularly in elderly age, where there's then significant risk of fractures as a result of falls, so a decrease in your ability to maintain your frame through a poor muscle mass, for example. So if we can stress that muscle and consistently use that muscle, then our chances of holding on to that into later life are far, far, far greater. So I think this concept of use it or lose it, same would go for bones and fracture risk, and same would go for joints and joint health and so on. The more that we can use our bodies, the better we're going to be able to allow ourselves to rely on them to be functioning and effective as we age. And then third tip, I'll probably be a little bit more specific here and maybe just talk about protein in particular. So protein intake is critical to maintenance and growth of muscle mass. And like I say, muscle mass is incredibly important as we age. It's important for a number of reasons, not just the ability to hold your frame and move your body in the way that you want to, but muscle, think of muscle as a huge sink, particularly a sink for carbohydrates and glucose. So if you want to maintain a good blood glucose handling, then actually having a whole heap of muscle or more muscle makes it darn side easier to do so than if you're under muscle. So there's numerous health and wellness benefits to maintaining muscle. But we tend to, as we age, probably start to progressively undereat on protein. We tend to perhaps fall into habits and routines when it comes to diet that are based around convenience a little bit more than what our body needs from a nutrient perspective. And protein is one of those nutrients that seems to suffer. And we maybe end up with a pattern of very low protein intake throughout most of the day, particularly breakfast and lunch, and then a big bolus of protein in the evening. And actually just focusing on consuming a little bit more protein throughout the day, but also partitioning it a little bit more intelligently, so it's a little bit more spaced out throughout the day, can make significant difference to our ability to retain and possibly even build muscle mass. So it's probably one for healthy aging. If any older individuals that I work with, that's probably one of the areas that I go to fairly quickly, is look to address their total protein intake to make sure it's sufficient to at least maintain their existing muscle mass, if not in order to prevent further loss, if not create some further growth for them. So yeah, I go in around consistency of nutrition, use it or lose it mentality with your body, and maybe specifically in around protein intake.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So 3 excellent tips there. We're going to go and dive a little bit deeper into them, and I'm going to start with a nice, what I would call a nice easy one, and maybe I'm calling it easy because I understand it a little bit more, and possibly because you've helped me with this, Rich, and you've taught me more about this. But tell us about protein intake. What would be good protein intake? And I'd love to know, as you'll probably remember, I am vegetarian, so I'd love to know from a vegetarian stance and also from like a meat eater stance as well. What would be the best sources?
Yeah, so this is probably a good example of where the world of sports nutrition and the world of general wellness can combine quite nicely, and we take learnings from one to the other. So if we look at protein intake, the recommended daily amount to consume for a healthy individual, healthy adult, will be around about 0.7 grams per kilogram per day of protein. All right, so bear with me while we run through figures. So somebody who is 100 kilograms, for example, would require 70 grams of protein a day. Now, that's based on making sure we avoid the issues associated with a low protein intake. So for me, that bar is kind of the bottom end of the scale, and actually we probably need to be pushing ourselves a good bit further up. So if we contrast that to a sports nutrition world, we often talk in or around 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body mass of protein intake per day. So if we make that nice and easy and we go 2 grams per kilo, somebody who's 100 kilograms again, we'd say we probably require about 200 grams of protein per day in order to meet your protein needs. And now those protein needs are kind of in 2 areas. They're in synthesizing new muscle tissue, and I'm isolating protein in its role for muscle tissue here. Protein has a wide variety of roles, as you guys know, talked about skincare, for example. That's protein is a key component of our skin and our connective tissue. So it has multiple roles, but if we isolate it to muscle building, we probably look around about 2 grams per kilogram is what we'd want. So 100 kilogram person requires between, if we looked at the general population recommendations, between 70 grams, and in my world, I would look to them to be about 200 grams. Okay, so there's obviously a big range within that. And therefore, if I come back to my tip about consistency, just get yourself in that range. You don't have to worry about being beyond that range. You're not going to get any return, but you do have to worry about being below that range. So just get yourself in that range is going to be the first area that I'd look to. Now, when it comes to protein, I kind of break it down into 3 areas: total, type, and timing. So in fact, let's go total, timing, and type's probably easier. So the total amount we've discussed, let's hit our protein targets. The timing of that, ideally, if we can spread that fairly neatly throughout the day, that becomes more beneficial for creating an environment in which our body is always able to build new muscle tissue than if we, took a very low protein intake at breakfast. Let's say it's a slice of toast at breakfast. Let's say lunch is a bowl of soup or a salad or something like that. And then let's say our evening meal is chicken and some potatoes or rice or something like that. We've got a big bolus of protein from our chicken in the evening, but we've got very little in lunch and dinner. If we can redistribute that and be within our protein target, we create more of an anabolic environment, essentially. It's an environment in which our body is always able to build new muscle tissue. Now, that's obviously further enhanced when we do resistance exercise, whatever that might well be. It could just be body weight. It could be an external load through lifting weights. It could just be running. For some people, it might just be walking. It might just be weight bearing exercise. That's absolutely fine. When we do that exercise, we increase our we increase the amount of protein that we break down. So our body's always breaking down muscle protein and always building it back up. So we increase the amount that we break down through that, but we also massively increase our ability to build it and to create new muscle tissue. So if we can then add a layer of incorporating some protein in and around the times when our body is active and therefore demanding more protein, then again, we're going to get a better response from that. We're going to get a more efficient response for building more protein there. So that's a little bit about the timing. And then the type, from a human muscle perspective, our muscle isn't too dissimilar to animal protein muscles. So therefore, if we eat animal-containing and meat-based animal-containing foods, animal orientated foods, then we build muscle incredibly easily. Same goes for dairy foods as well. From plant-based food sources, it's that little bit harder, but it's still absolutely possible for your body to extract the amino acids that it needs, which are the tiny little building blocks of protein chains, and to assimilate new muscle tissue off of that. So the target doesn't change, maybe just the volume of food that you have to consume from a purely plant-based diet to hit that protein target is that little bit higher, but it's not difficult and it's not unachievable whatsoever. And like I say, what matters most, and it'll go with that hierarchy, is that it matters that you hit the total amount. It matters less how you break that down. It matters even less how you get about that, as long as you're consistently within that target zone. So does that kind of help? Does that make sense and kind of break down the priorities there?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose Susie and I, we speak about this quite a bit on the podcast. So we come at this from quite different levels. So I am definitely more in the kind of general health and wellness as opposed to the kind of elite sports stuff. So I'm definitely really interested to speak to you about, if someone... Now, that information you've just given us is so in depth, it's, it might be the first time that anyone's hearing that level of explanation around it. And there is so much information out there. There's so many different ways that people can, look at, say, weight loss or whatever it might want to be. Or, they maybe just have become aware that what we're feeding our kids isn't actually the best. There could be processed food in there. There could be, as you say, convenience habits, all of those things. So in a more layman's term or a more kind of beginner's term, what kind of advice could you give people that maybe find themselves in that situation?
Sure. So I do appreciate it's slightly difficult for me because I tend not to read any mainstream media about nutrition because I can afford to cut behind the headlines and understand the underlying science that sits there. So I do recognize that actually it's a messy little world. So if I was to go with something that's really general, I'd say, if we eat in kind of the way that our grandparents, for our current generation, if we eat in the way that our grandparents taught us, then we ain't going to go that far wrong. If we think about what a healthy, balanced plate looked like, maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's probably not too dissimilar to how we should be eating in general ourselves. So I'd look back before we look forward and then try and apply that to what we're faced with just now. Undoubtedly, we're faced with, almost an obesogenic environment when it comes to food, that it's incredibly easy for us to get access to food at very low cost just now, which has, high calorie content, so it's calorie dense, but is nutritionally fairly weak or fairly poor. So it does require maybe a little bit more effort than, no more effort than it did, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago to access the same good quality nutrients, but probably requires a little bit more effort into than our current culture of, wanting to achieve everything through one or two clicks of a button and not wishing to spend any more time engaging in food. So, when it comes to sources of information, I would go on the general rule of if it's too good to be true, then it probably isn't true, and I think that's probably the case, particularly when it comes to miracle solutions for diets or particular nutrients or foods solving any particular problems. There is no magic key, unfortunately, which is why I come back to this point about just be consistent, be consistently good or decent, and good things is going to come instead of trying to be absolutely perfect. That being said, as far as sources of advice, online NHS and government-based websites are excellent and are very good sources. I think there is sometimes a little bit of a pushback towards some of these, whether there's conspiracy theories about hidden agendas and so on, but I don't look at that. I look, when you're thinking about things on a population level, first and foremost, the advice that we provide in the UK is absolutely excellent advice. So whether it be NHS or British Dietetic Association, which is the governing body for dietitians within the UK, they have a wealth of very, very good advice on general eating, as well as eating for some very specific cases, whether that be stages of somebody's life cycle, whether it be for a healthy, active, exercising individual, or whether it be for particular clinical conditions and disease states as well. So all of that advice is thoroughly well researched and should be respected, particularly on that general population level. Now, everybody's got then individual differences and individual requirements. So it's upon the individual to take that information and try and assimilate that for them, for their beliefs, whether that be plant-based diet or vegetarian-based diet, or whether that be interpreting that for their household and their family structure and whatever their daily routine is. But the information is great nonetheless.
So I'm now going to come back to your first 2 points, because for me those are real favourites for me and how I live my life. So consistency and use it or lose it. And the way that I look at it is, with use it or lose it, I always think about prevention. So that's always my biggest thing. I'm looking at, if I do this, is that benefiting me later on in life, or is it hindering me? So that's how I often make decisions. However, I'm still human, and of course there's there's choices that I make that are not positive, but that's okay, because exactly like what you said, you've got to just aim for being better instead of perfect. So I love that. And when it comes to consistency, again, Lorraine will tell you, I'm like the master of consistency, almost to the stage where it's quite annoying for people, because I am a person that if I say I'm going to do it, I do it, and I stay consistent at it. And so I do love those two. But I have been very fortunate to hear you talk to a crowd of people about nutrition, about consistency, about different things. And I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here, and I hope you remember this. And if you don't, it's fine, because I can tell everybody, because I remember it clearly. But you told a story once when you were talking about consistency and not beating ourselves up, about a car tyre.
Yes.
And for me, any time I fall off the wagon, I always remember that story. It's one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever given for me, because I like it in simple terms and I love consistency. And so can you share that little story, because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, so it's a simple analogy that I like to make, in that quite often people will sabotage their diet. So this striving for being perfect, as soon as somebody, let's say, falls off the bandwagon or breaks what they deem as being the perfect rule that they've created for themselves, they quite often sabotage that and take that to extremes. So, for example, somebody's saying, oh, well, I had one cookie and that wasn't on my diet, so I might as well finish the rest of the box of cookies. Or, we went out for dinner and I didn't eat what I should have done, so I might as well now have the ice cream, and I might as well make that ice cream into a full weekend of eating rubbish, and then I'll start again on Monday. And I look at it and go, it's remarkably illogical, and we know it's illogical. And the analogy is, if you've got a flat tire, the first thing that you don't do is get out a knife and go and slash all the other 3 tires just because you've got a flat tire. We don't do that in any other way, shape, or form in life. We have a hiccup, we have a setback, and we address that hiccup or setback, and then we go about our business. We don't look to sabotage that. Yet we love to do this in diet. So yeah, just as you say, Susie, it falls in line with the idea of being consistent as opposed to perfect, and accepting the fact that there's times, or better, instead of perfect, so there's times when we can't be consistent with our behaviors, and that's absolutely fine, because we're humans, and life is more than about eating well, life is more than about eating for a start, and it's more than about eating to a predetermined plan, which may or may not be the right thing to do at that given point in time.
Yeah, there's often out like people that were at that talk. I'll often be speaking to them and I'm like, oh man, I slashed all 4 tires this weekend. Yeah, I think I say it too often.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I'm just curious to this one, just little things again that you were saying, and I always like to give the listeners things that they can go and read and research, and it's a little bit off topic, but again, you talked about, and it's about consistency and being better instead of perfect. Have you read the book Atomic Habits?
Do you know, that's James Clear's book, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
I've not read it, but it's bookmarked. I've got it either in a basket somewhere online, or it's to be read. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It just talks a lot about some of the things that you're talking about, and of course, he alludes to sport quite a lot as well. And you know, so yeah, I think that would be a good read for you and for people that are listening. Yeah,
I'm fairly sure it's from him as well. But you know, I read a number of his blogs years ago, and I always like the concept of looking at the behaviors of somebody that you might aspire to be. So I think he used the example of if he wants to. It was an exercise one. So if you wanted to squat 200 kilograms, for example, then what are the behaviors of somebody who can squat 200 kilograms? And it's about, well, you know what, they squat 2 or 3 times a week. They invest time in recovering from those squat sessions. They invest time in their diet and nutrition. So instead of actually just creating a relatively arbitrary goal of, well, I want to get there, so I'll just work hard until I get there, he actually focused he created the habits around what the behaviors of somebody who is already successful within that. And I quite like that. It's something we use in the sporting world quite a lot, is not necessarily focus on the outcome, but we focus a lot on the process. And if you get the processes right, the outcome will come to you. You've just got to engage in those processes and try and enjoy the process as much as you can.
Yeah, we're very guilty of not focusing on the processes and focusing on the outcome. Very guilty.
Yeah, I'm a perfect example at the moment in that through being away, I'm very busy over the summer. Exercise took a real downturn. It became a source of stress to try and think about how to get it in, rather than a source of stress relieving after I was getting it done. So I took a very relaxed approach to how much exercise I was doing over the summer, because it just wasn't the greatest priority at that time. Now I'm back and I can be a bit more consistent with my exercise. I have no goals in place. I have nothing set to say, well, I want to get back to lifting the same weight or running the same times as I was before. Actually, I'm excited about enjoying the process. I'm excited about just going to the gym today, going to the gym tomorrow, having a rest day, doing some active recovery, doing some stretching. These are the bits that I'm getting a real kick out of just now. And I'm very comfortable that there's no defined end goal, because I know that any end goal that I place there would be relatively arbitrary. And actually what I need to do in order to make progress is just enjoy the process just now, and end goal will come in due course.
So come on, you're going to have to share with the listeners. Sorry, Lorraine, I just had to get this one in. Where were you in the summer then, Rich?
We're going to say the same thing. We know you weren't lying on a beach somewhere, so come on.
There was a little swimming gala that was in the midst of a little competition called the Olympic Games in Tokyo.
You done okay?
I was fortunate. Okay. Yeah, we did all right. We came back with a few glittering medals.
Oh, just must have been absolutely amazing. Obviously, we had a bit of a vested interest in the swim team, because we were keen to cheer them on, and it's just absolutely amazing what was achieved.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We set ourselves some hard targets in order to reach, but we were very confident because we got a great group of swimmers, a great bunch, and fantastic coaches and support staff there. So it was brilliant to bring home what we did, and we're really excited about how we can move that forward to Paris in 3 years' time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think maybe it's just because as you get older, people seem a lot younger in their achievements, but so young, so you just think what can be, what's next, and as you say, like, it's very, very positive and exciting for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, swimming as a sport, it's typically a younger age group. You know, we don't have too many swimmers that go into their 30s and any further than that. But what we're very fortunate about is that the current cohort of medalists from Tokyo are all still young enough and more than competent enough to continue on that journey through to Paris in 2024. So we sit here now with really excited about the opportunity that Paris presents us, because we're going to have an even stronger team than we had at Tokyo. I'm sure of that.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that's so exciting, so exciting. So listen, we are very mindful of your time, and we just always end the podcast in the exact same way that we start it. So you may have covered this already, but if you were to give everyone one bit of advice or one tip that they could go and implement in their lives right now that would help them towards healthy aging, what would that be?
I quite like this one. It sounds a bit flippant, but it's not. It's don't eat whilst moving. All right. How often do we make a positive nutrition choice whilst we're moving? How often do you make a positive nutrition choice when you're eating something in the car, or you're eating something on the train, or you're drinking something while you're out on a walk, whatever it might well be? I think if we all just spent a little, or invested, and it is an investment, invest a bit more time in going, actually, I'm going to respect the process of eating. I'm going to respect the food, where it's come from, its provenance, how fortunate I am to have this food in front of me, and sit down and eat it and enjoy it. And then we can move afterwards. We can get in the car, we can go on the plane, we can go for the walk, wherever it might well be. But if we do that, one, we're probably going to make a slightly more positive nutrition choice. And two, we're actually just going to engage in that process of enjoying that food. And with that will probably come an improved digestive response to consuming that food. And with that will probably come a little bit more contentment with the food and a bit more respect towards that. So yeah, don't eat whilst moving would be my mini tip.
Love, that's a brilliant one. Yep, I've actually never heard that before, so that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
It's probably one that's born out of personal reflection, that I never eat particularly well when I'm on the move. So we've got to protect the time in order to invest in the food.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you, thank you. Oh, Susie, are you going to end us off?
Yeah, I can do. That wee bit will get edited then.
I did, but did you not see me doing my wee?
I didn't actually. No.
Is that the key?
We've got a new sign. We've just decided today, but I've not got into the habit of it yet. It's that thing: use it or lose it.
Right. Yeah.
Right, cut. Let's start again. The great thing about YouTube is everybody gets to see all this part, though. It's just the podcast. They get to see that we're real humans, that we muck up. So yeah, right, give me a wee second. Richard, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I really appreciate it, and I do feel really honoured in the fact that we get to use your phenomenal expertise, knowledge within CrossFit Fife. You know, our members are so lucky to be able to come and ask you these questions. You've put together a nutritional guide for all our brand new members. They all get access to that. And of course, you've done many talks throughout the years for our members as well. And I am super, super grateful for that. You are a person who contributes hugely to people's health, wellness and performance. And I just want to give a little recognition of that and just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all you do for our business and for the greater community of CrossFit Fife, and actually the greater UK community, because you're a wealth of knowledge, which is just amazing. And well done to you for your consistency, your dedication to learning your subject and becoming the best in that subject. So thank you so much for being with us. And for anybody that's listening to us, just a reminder, you want to subscribe to our podcast, which you can find on Spotify. If you want to go to YouTube and look for Healthy Aging Podcast, you'll find us in there. We have a Facebook group called Healthy Aging Podcast. And then, of course, you can follow us on Instagram as well. Most important, like, share, comment, let people know about this podcast, because it has got so much incredible information. And as we've already said, the speakers that we get to invite on here are incredible with such fantastic knowledge. Why would you not want to tune in? Have a great week, everybody.